Hey, this is Dr. Priyanka Venugopal, and you're listening to the Unstoppable Mom Brain podcast, getting your work done at work with Dr. Sarah Smith. Today, I am thrilled to bring you a very special podcast guest. This is Dr. Sarah Smith, who is a practicing rural family physician and also a charting champion. She's a charting expert who helps physicians specifically get their work done at work. So when they leave the office, they can really truly feel present with their family. And in her words, as she describes on the podcast today, create bucket loads of time. I have been aware of Sarah now for years. She is in a lot of the same circles that I am in, and I have seen the work that she does impact so many physician women. And I knew that a lot of what she teaches physician women could really apply to professionals in every industry. And I know based on what Sarah has shared in some of the circles that we're in, that her perspective, her strategy, and really the mindset that she brings to her clients would be so impactful to bring to this podcast. So I cannot wait to dive into today's podcast episode with Dr. Sarah Smith. She's going to share truly some tangible tips that you can start applying today to, in her words, create bucket loads of time at home where you get work done in the workplace and really feel more present being at home with your family. And before we get into today's episode, I want to make sure that you know the Unstoppable group is currently open for enrollment. The April cohort is enrolling now. Spots are limited and they are filling on a first come, first serve basis. This is my intimate 6-month small group coaching program specifically designed for professional working moms who want to lose the weight they want this year without the fads and the gimmicks. I teach my clients a simple science-backed strategy that really you can fold into your life forever. One of the things that I used to do, and I don't want you to do anymore, is believe that you have to just lose the weight quickly with quick fads and gimmicks. But then when you lose the weight and you reach your goal weight, that you go back to your quote unquote old way of being. When you do that, you will inevitably gain the weight back. If you're interested in working with me, if the work that we have been doing together on this podcast resonates with you, do not wait another day to grab your consult call with me where we will discuss if we are a good fit to work together. You can grab your consult over at the unstoppablemombrain.com/group, where you will learn all about the nuts and the bolts of the program, the features, and all the fun things that we do together. Plus, there's a button there for you to book a call with me. If you don't see a call time that works, don't worry. Email my team over at info@theunstoppablemombrain.com and we will find something that works. The next group is starting in April. I want you to get immediate access right now, the moment that you join, where we unlock the curriculum. You can start losing weight even before our very first coaching call in April. And truly, more than that, the moment that you join, you will feel such relief that you have a science-backed strategy that is actually going to work. So without further ado, let us get into my conversation with Sarah Smith, and I hope you guys really loved this episode as much as I did. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Unstoppable Mom Brain podcast. Today I have a really, really special guest. This is Dr. Sarah Smith. I have been following her forever. She is in so many physician communities and really a coaching expert on getting your work done at work. Specifically, she works with physicians. I'm going to have her introduce herself. I just cannot wait for this conversation because as a professional working mom, if there's one thing I know, it's you want to get your work done at work. And when you come home, you want to be present at home. So Sarah, introduce yourself, and we're just going to jump into this conversation. I'm so excited.
Perfect. Thank you so very much for inviting me. I love this space. I love what you do in the world too. So yeah, I'm a working family physician. I also work in the emergency department, inpatients, and I also help physicians and clinicians with their clinical day, like any aspect of the clinical day that's interfering with you getting home with the work of the day done. So I know there's a lot of pressure from different healthcare systems and EMRs and things, but even then, even with your patient load, we're trying to work on your best and most simple solutions for getting you home so you can be the person you want to be at home. So yeah.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about how you went from being a rural family physician to becoming, I think of you really as an expert in the field around getting your work done at work. And I know that you specifically work with physicians in charting, but how did you go from being a physician in, probably also struggling with maybe some elements of this to becoming an expert in getting your work done at work and being home? Tell us a little bit about your whole journey.
For sure. So it's interesting because this was what I struggled with, of course, right? So I am the original decades and decades of leaving the office knowing I wasn't done and having to come home and finish it in the evening. and on the weekends, and having my life kind of disappearing in front of me with these little kids at home. So from my perspective, we have two kids. We have Harrison, who was born when I was in 5th year med school, and then James, who was born in my year after internship. So I'm from Australia, and I have the fortunate position of having a husband who wanted to stay at home with the kids. So that was awesome. So we had a parent at home, but I would still get the text at like 6:30. This is hours after the last patient left. Where are you? Are you coming home? Like, what is going on? And I'm like, oh yeah, duh, I got to get home. So I'd go home, either help with dinner or be there for dinner, have supper with the kids, put the kids to bed, and then I would be back on the computer. And on the weekend, they'd be like, oh, should we do this weekend? Should we do that this weekend? And I would be like, yeah, I have paperwork. And so my brain was constantly filled with this toss up between, do I say yes to the barbecue and the going out to this thing on the weekend, or do I stay home and get these 3 forms done that I brought home for the weekend, or whatever it was that I was working on? And that constant pulling of the difficulty between the mum duties and the work duties, right? And I started in a position where there was no EMR at home. So like this was me. And in the process of this, we moved continents. So we came to Canada 11 years ago, right? So I had bigger kids by then. So we're in a different medical system, a different EMR, a different way of seeing patients. I actually have 2 rooms to see patients in Canada, which is totally different from how I did it in Australia. And the same problems happening again. This time I do have access to my EMR at home. So I would be able to still get the text at 6:30 saying, where are you? Kind of head home and then work in the evenings, but at home. So then it was just me. I was the only one suffering at that point, right?
Right. And this is just like an example of you sharing, like you changed continents, you changed jobs, you had a totally different system. Effectively, your
15 years
circumstances
later.
changed, totally different circumstance, but you were still finding yourself in the same problem.
In the same pain, in the same
Right.
problem. And
Right.
it doesn't just get better. And every single mentor along the way, I'm like, how do you do this? How do you do the paperwork? And they were like, you come in on Saturday. That was the answer. We'll come in on Sunday. That was the answer. That was the only answer I ever got. And so on my way to a medical student orientation, I was interested in becoming a more motivational educator for my medical students. I love precepting. I love educating the next generation. That's part of what we do as rural family docs, is we grow our own next, replacement. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll find a podcast. I've never listened to one of those. And so I popped on the one that popped up at the top, which was a life coach. And 5 hours later,
Right.
the nice big long drive.
Right.
5
This
hours
is the
later.
journey of the coaching podcast, my friends. Yes, so good. I love that you're sharing that, Sarah. Very similar for me too. I love it.
It was impossible is possible. And I'm like, but you don't understand. This is like the impossible problem. This is 15 years worth of possible problem, right?
Right.
I'm like, well, I've transitioned country. I've transitioned EMR. I've transitioned patient population. I think this problem will follow me. And I'm like, well, buckle up, sister. We're going to have to figure this out, because there's no one else in the world figuring it out. So it was a step-by-step process to first step into the mindset of, what if it is possible to have a different experience of clinical medicine? What if it is possible to be having a different experience of our day that could create what we want? And what did I want? Well, first of all, I said, well, I don't want to work at night. Okay, interesting. I want to be home on time. Okay, so I need to finish hours earlier and with everything done. That means a lot of stuff is going to have to be changed up in my clinical day. But holding on to that, where am I going? What do I want to actually achieve? Kind of starting to open my eyes about what is happening within my day that is stopping me getting there, and starting piece by piece, low-hanging fruit, conversations with others, changing up the way I do things so that my clinical day becomes keepable within the hours of the day.
Right. What I'm hearing you say is the pain point was very clear to you. You weren't under any illusion around medicine is amazing and everything about medicine is amazing. You were very aware of the fact that while you loved maybe a lot of what you did as a physician, and I totally understand that feeling. There were so many aspects around your practice of medicine that felt painful, and it was creating
Mhm.
your home life that in a way that you didn't want it to. So before maybe you thought, I don't think this can ever change, to, I wrote this down, you said, what if it is possible to have a different experience? And Sunny Smith was actually on the podcast recently. She said, it's almost like when you put questions into the Google search engine, you get different results. So you started planting that question. I wonder if it's possible for me to have a different experience of my work life. And I do this with my weight loss clients. For me to
Mhm.
lose the weight I want, what if I could have a totally different experience? And you put that into the Google search engine, all of a sudden the solutions that you find are going to be, they're going to be
Mhm.
so much better. So, okay, so keep going. So then how did you get to becoming the charting coach?
So I figured it out. It took
Mhm.
it took a full 18 months
Mhm.
of starting the process of where am I, what do I want and how do I get it, and doing the work of change and creating this different experience, and bucket loads of time. Like, you would not believe the
Mhm.
amount of time you can create. Like, we are talking about creating bucket loads of time in your life. Evenings, coming home, sitting on the couch going, I've got nothing to do. What? What?
Mhm.
That's insane. And then weekends of, what are we doing this weekend? Like, it's not even necessarily fun or exciting initially. It's kind of a restlessness of,
Yeah,
oh, there's space in my brain. this is
to
this is
have that. Yeah.
delightful. And what the heck? And then the whole, like, 15 years of doing it one way, and now I'm doing it a different way, and it's so much better. And I'd become a coach in the process because I wanted to do the coaching for myself, because within my clinical day, helping my patients
Right.
excel, take ownership of
Absolutely.
their health and decide what they want and going after it, it was really exciting. 15 years as
Mhm.
a family physician, suddenly I'm having different conversations with my humans in the room saying,
Right.
what do you want? What can I help you achieve? I notice that you think the boss is toxic. What do you want? How do
Mhm.
you want to show up at work? How can we change your experience of work without changing
Mhm.
the boss?
Right.
And it was so intoxicatingly fun. So then I said to my fellow physician humans, what do you want help with? Well, the resounding answer was the paperwork. Well, I hung my head. I'm like, oh no, the thing
Mhm.
I finally got out from underneath, and they want me to delve back in there.
Mm.
And then I'm like, but wait, I figured that out. Maybe I can help them too, maybe. And so I stepped one by one through the same
Okay.
process that I'd taken myself.
Yeah.
One by one, 500 hours later,
Mhm.
within 6 sessions, they're all going home with their paperwork done. I'm like, it works. So that is I'm the dream keeper of possibility, that I'm not going to take your brain's current opinion of your day and tell you it can't be done. I'm going to hold for you your dream of, can I make this sustainable?
Right.
Can I make this sustainable my way so that I can achieve what I want to achieve, whether it be my family or my weight loss or my, like, can we make
Mhm.
a difference within the day to give me some space or time back to do the other things I want to do? And so I
Mhm.
let your brain get away with the whole questioning of, can I create something different? I'm like, absolutely. It's been done
Right.
hundreds of times now.
Right. And I think that that's like speaks to so much around the power of having a process that works, a process that you've seen work again and again and again. And now it's repeatable in a way where it's not just applicable to maybe a small subset of physicians. It probably applies to, which is why I wanted you on this podcast, applies to high achievers. It could apply to every industry if you identify as a working mom. So when you really parse out and think about your personal experience and what you've seen with your clients, what do you think is the real problem that has been in the way for people to create this on their own? Like what is it in terms of their mindset, maybe in terms of their strategy, that you might try to buckle down and work harder during the day, but it just doesn't seem to last? What do you think has been the real problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the step back and notice. So I'll tell you an example of that. So I would see patients and I would just leave the chart until later, because that's kind of how it was done, or I had just
Mhm.
learned to do it. I'd kind of put that off till later. And then the other things of the day. So, when the last patient or the last phone call, the phones finally get turned off at your workplace, right? If you're not seeing patients, and you're like, phew, there's no more incoming. Now I can just
Mhm.
look at the pile and get it done without interruption, right?
Mhm.
We kind of wait for that moment, and we get to that moment and we look at it and we're like, Oh,
This
there's a lot
mountain,
there.
this
It's a
pile of charts that you
mountain.
have to get
So
through,
this
right?
obstacle course between me and home is insurmountable. It doesn't even matter if I start, I'm not going to get done. And then my brain would say things like, I could work for 24 hours and still not be done. And it would say things like, why bother starting? You're never going to be finished. Or where do I even start? Does this ever end? Do I have to get off this hamster wheel for it to end? Like, this was the experience I was having, the dread of, I don't want to go see more patients because that's just going to make more work.
It's almost like instead of seeing a patient and wrapping up, the history that you would see is you'd see the patient, you'd rush off to the next patient.
Yeah, I
And
just,
it's almost like I'll deal with the charting later. I'll
deal with
put
that
this
later.
off to later. Do you
Yeah.
think that the reason that people do that, and I'm curious, and for anyone that's listening, I want you to take this as an opportunity to think about how this applies, if you're not a physician, how this applies to you in your workday, where you take something maybe that feels like a small task, or even maybe feels kind of overwhelming. I'll do this one later when I have spacious time. Do you think that the reason for that is because we're trying to quickly move on to the next, like the next patient or the next quick item to do? Or is it because we just don't want to do the charting? We just don't want to do that work and it feels boring. It's more fun to talk with patients. It's maybe more fun to do certain parts of the job and not other parts. Like, what do you think is the reason we would put it off?
Yeah, there are so many reasons, but you're hitting a lot of them. Is that we have a human brain. So a
Oh,
human
yeah.
brain loves
Right.
pleasure
Right.
and it hates
I mean, who would
pain.
have thought? Who
We
would have
have a
thought?
painful story about this unfinished work. A painful story. Charting is hard. It takes too long. Paperwork is hard. Writing that thing is too hard. I don't want to have to think about that. I need quiet or peace and quiet to do that work. That's a real one.
Oh,
Well,
I've
I
told
can't.
myself this too. I need to be able to focus. I need to be in the flow to get my
Yeah,
best
yeah,
quality work done. I've
that
told
was
myself
too
that too.
frustrating. I don't want to go and write that down right now. Any of the above, like, because it's painful. Pleasure is, I can go to that next meeting. I can go see that next patient. Like, that's much more pleasurable. I just, my brain is more entertained by that. And the sitting down to empty that task box, no, that's not the fun part, right? So we love
Mhm.
pleasure. We don't like pain. We've told ourselves a very painful story about this charting or this paperwork. If we're taking it home, we're doing it on the weekend. Like, that is stealing our life. Why would we want to do that? Like, our brain is like,
Right.
it's onto us. It puts it
Right.
off. Okay.
Yeah.
And we do things efficiently. So what I mean by efficiently is I had 15 years of practicing. I'll do that later. I'll get to that.
So it's
Yeah.
like, so it's almost like our brain has created shortcuts around
No, a
habitual
super highway
thoughts.
of leaving it till later. Super highway.
Right.
Okay, so what I'm
Right.
asking my brain to do now is the goat track with rocks of different. So doing different is hard and takes brain power to think about doing something in a different way. So first was noticing. I'll go back to that. So I'd see patients, I'd have charts to do, and then there was everything else about the day. I didn't even take notice of how many things is that? How do I empty this? How do I get this thing out of my task box? I had no step back and think about it at all. I'd never been given a strategy about how do I design this so that I can get home. I'd never even contemplated that that was a question that could be asked. It was simply shit that had to happen
Mm-hmm.
within my clinical day. It was the
Okay.
stuff that happened. So there was hundreds and hundreds of things that would come in a day. I had never counted them. I had never had any appreciation about how long it takes me to get something out of this inbox. So say you want to get home 2 hours earlier, right? So a lot of my physicians, when they first kind of start looking at their day, they're like, oh, the patients leave at 4:30 and I leave the office at 6:30. Interesting. I wonder why. And so
Okay.
they start noticing the process of how they kind of get there and the
Okay.
things about the day. And then they want to choose a different way. Right. So
Mm.
if they're going to choose a different way, they have to ignore the super highway of how it's going to go easily and start using the goat track and making the goat track of, I see a patient and close the chart. That is
Okay.
not normal for my brain. And so
Right. I
now that
see.
is the
Okay.
goat track. That is the
Okay.
obstacle. I'm going to hit my toe a couple of times. It's going to hurt to do this, see the patient close the chart, because that is not my normal way. Everything about my being wants to hop out of that chair and go see the next patient.
And go to, we want the super highway. We
Right,
want
because
the
I have
super
taught my
highway. Yes.
brain that the
Yes.
next patient is more important than the note.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you want different, it feels uncomfortable.
Right.
It is much less efficient. It takes longer initially. It is not a pleasant journey. Right. Superhighway is way more comfortable than the goat track of new and
Right.
unpleasant. But we want to choose the discomfort of what if I started to make changes about my day that were going to keep things that I'm doing closed behind me. right? So as I see something and I do it, and I see the next thing and I do it, and I see the next, so see a patient, and that complete encounter is done. Now, instead of a disaster following me of things I'm just putting in the cart for later, it's empty. And I'm like, ooh, that's fun.
It's almost like you end up having a little bit of like a love affair with the results you're going to create, even though there's discomfort along the way. Your eye is on the prize of like, ooh, but the cart is going to be empty. I'm not going to have a pile of paperwork sitting on my desk. I think this is really important to highlight that when you start something new, because you're used to the superhighway and we're talking about being on a goat track with rocks. I love this visual so much. When you do something new and it does take more time at the get-go, maybe it's not smooth right off the bat, you do stumble. How do you navigate it affecting other teammates or your colleagues or maybe other physicians or whoever else you're working with? They're going to get slowed down because they're used to you. Listen, they're used to you being the workhorse and just like getting it done, and you spending your own personal time to do the charting. So how do you talk about navigating that obstacle for someone that does want to make the change, but maybe the change is going to affect their teammates, their colleagues, their staff?
Okay. I'll give you an example. This is a good one. Thank you for this question. So I had a palliative care physician come into my space. She's like, but I work with a team and we all walk together to do the ward round. I'm like, great, good. I said, do they all want to go home on time? Yes. Okay.
Sounds about right.
Right.
Yeah.
And are they all going home on time? No. Why? Well, they're doing their charting. Interesting. I said, what if we said, hey guys, who wants to get out of here on time? Oh, yes, please. That'd be great. Okay, great. What would it take to start to make a difference within our day so that what will happen is we'll go in and see Mrs. Jones, and then we will do that and complete that and move to the next one. What do you think about this idea? And they were like, well, that's an interesting and odd, but I'm willing to try it if there's this possibility of getting out of here 2 hours earlier. Well, dang it, 2 or 3 weeks later, they're like zipping through that ward round. All the notes are done. They're delighted. They're all going home. And the other teams are going, what did you guys do?
Right. And Sarah, what you're describing to me, this is for someone like me who has historically been like, I might be confident, but I've always been a little bit of I might be shy to put these kind of ideas out there in a team space. So I wanted to drop that question here because sometimes it feels scary to be someone that introduces a new concept in the workplace or to your team, or maybe you're not in a leadership position, you're an associate in a practice, but also what we're talking about is practicing courage, really practicing, using your voice to feel courage and take a step forward, because what we're talking about is trailblazing. Trailblazing is changing the culture of how women work so that like, is the prize worth it for us to feel courage, the discomfort, choosing the goat road and these rocks and like getting the team to buy in? I love the story you're sharing because now the whole entire community of the people working get to benefit.
The physician, the social worker, the dietitian, the nurse practitioner, they're all doing their notes as they go. And they're all having a different experience and they're seeing the same number of patients and they're done. At the end of the ward round, everything's done about those patients. There may be some conversations to come back to. The family want to talk. Sure, we'll send the right person back for that conversation at the end. But the actual like seeing the patient and figuring out the work of the day for this person, all wrapped up, right?
Yeah.
So that's just like kind of step one. And then the other pieces that may have had to change about that, for instance, interruptions. Okay, so if we're in our day and somebody comes up to you and says blah blah blah, right? What are those? Just taking notice of who interrupts you and what do they ask you? And then the step back would be, I noticed that I get asked, this every day. What would I need to do, say, have a conversation about to empower that person to have the answer ahead of time? Or if it is me who has to make that decision, when do I want that question? Which interruptions do I need right now? And which ones should we batch? And I'll come find you at X o'clock and you can give me all the questions. I'll give you all the answers.
What I'm hearing you say is there has to be almost like a retraining of, number one, how we train ourselves to batch interruptions. So we have to go first. We have to first say we are going to not allow ourselves to get interrupted all the time. Our door is not an open door policy when in the middle of the work, in the middle of a project, I'm not interrupted, right? So we have to have the discipline on ourselves to batch when we're allowing interruptions. But the second piece of what you're talking about is really having an infrastructure and almost almost retraining your staff, your team, your colleagues, unless there's an emergency, that these interruptions also have to be batched. Do you find that there's a lot of resistance to that with the clients that you've worked with? Because I know for me, I used to feel like I want to help everyone. I want to be that helpful person in the office. So I'm curious, like, whether there's resistance around wanting to be helpful and not wanting to take that away from staff, colleagues, friends, versus what you're talking about.
Okay, so it sounds really lovely to be open door policy, but I want you to notice the internal when you're now putting out all the fires, right? So it's not normally, oh, I'm delighted by you interrupting me. It's like, oh, I'll put on my happy face because I said open door policy. I know I have open door policy, but this is starting to hurt me, right? There are ways to be leaders within your place. And you may not be the leader or the boss, but you are a leader within the team that you work in. When you're teaching people to come find you because you would love to help them and they use your brain for all of the answers, it's exhausting. Versus, hey guys, when you come to me and say blah, 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 I need a little more information than that.
Right.
You know, if this
Yeah.
photocopy is on the blink, what do we need to do to fix it? Does someone who want to make a call, who's going to be best at that? And starting to set up these conversations or finding time when we can use our people to their highest level.
And training them to operate in that way. One of the things that I have seen with my clients, I'm curious if you've seen this, I feel like it's true with physicians, is we're not even aware of how much we have been wanting people to need us. We have been wanting to be the person with all the answers. And I think that it's, unless you're aware of your tendency and the mindset around this, you might be operating without being aware. In my experience, what I've seen is women, professional women, we get a sense of pride and accomplishment and worthiness and value when we are the person that people come to with, because we want to be the ones with the answers. But I think the work that at least I've done with my clients, and I'm guessing this is very applicable here, is what would it be like for us to create our own pride, our own accomplishment, our own satisfaction, value, and worthiness without it being attached to people needing us. And how amazing we get to hold them in their highest regard and let them operate with their most efficient work strategies. And then we get to also be the most efficient and actually go home and live our life.
Yeah. And it is a process to get there. So I remember when we were doing some work early on with team building, and we were talking to we had a facilitator within these conversations, which was really helpful. And it was great training for me to even see how do we work as a team. And it is really hard to let go when you're at that really high professional level, because the people that you're going to give a task to will not do it the way you do it. And one of the most important things I learned was, what if they could do it better than you? And I'm like, no, I want to be the best. And then I said, okay, well, I know that when my brain objects to a statement, it usually means I need to press in and kind of figure out why that is. I'm like, okay, all right, I won't immediately reject that comment because I know for sure I can always do it better than them. But all right, what do you mean? So we had
Let's
some
just be a little curious, just a little.
What? I can always do it better than them. All right. So a form, my favorite thing in the world is not a form, just so you know, I'm being very sarcastic. At the end of a consultation, the patient brings out of their bag and hands you the form and says, oh, here, I need this done. You can do it when you have time. And my brain would say, there's an hour of my life gone. But it wasn't just an hour of my life gone. It was often an entire weekend, because I bring home these forms that people said I could do in my own time. And I would leave them there while I cleaned the house and refused to go out because I had paperwork. But I would do literally anything else because they were so painful to think about. And when I went to work on Monday, they still weren't done, which was just drove me completely bananas. I would fill in the form. I would find all the things in the chart to attach to the form. I would have this nice big package and I'd give that to the ladies and say, send that off, right? Hours and hours of very exceptional work, very exceptional work. I would despise every minute of it. Okay. And then there's these humans in the world who love doing forms. And I'm like, they better at it than me. What? And they actually can be taught what to attach to this type of form. And they've got the time to do it. And so actually they end up better at it than me. All I had to do was, hey, come alongside me and say, what would you attach to this type of form? That was a great question. If they didn't know the answer, I could teach them. And then I would say, don't send it. Just pass it back to me so I can just see if we got it right. Oh, I noticed that you didn't go find blah, blah, blah. That's also important. Here's where you find it in the chart. And we hand it off. And they do it better than me because they do it today. And it's done, not in 8 weeks' time when I finally finally overcome my objection and get it done, right?
To get the bucket loads of time, which is like the forever wish, I think, of the professional working mom, who the number one thing I hear is I don't have the time or I don't have enough time. To get the bucket loads of time, there's an investment of time at the start. There's an investment of effort and energy and bandwidth to train yourself, number one, to train yourself to let it go, and also to train your team, your colleagues, your friends, your partners, whoever is in your bubble, in how they can be optimized. And so I imagine this is part of the discomfort we're choosing, the goat road with the rocks. We're choosing this discomfort because we want the bucket loads of time later.
Yeah, and we want to be able to say, what is my highest level work in my day as a professional person? What is actually mine? And when am I being a very expensive secretary?
Right.
Okay.
Actually feeling fulfilled. The reason you got into your profession, you actually get to do more of that, the part that actually fulfills you.
All right. So let's take another example, which might feel even more weird and scary, is a dermatologist. A dermatologist needs about 3 to 5 minutes with a patient to figure out what this is. Like sometimes more. Absolutely. They're very interesting and weird conditions. But then the education and how to apply this thing and all of that. What if there was a team member who could do that better than you? So we had this example of a team in the States of dermatologists who said, we see high volume. We want to keep seeing high volume. We want to run on time and we want to get home with everything done. I'm like, great. Who's around? Who can help you? And so instead of thinking about it like you're going to see Dr. So-and-so, we start thinking about it as we're going to go see team so-and-so. When you arrive, Nurse Julie is going to do this, this, and this. And then Dr. So-and-so is going to come in. They're going to figure out what this is. They're going to talk to you about what the options are. We're going to choose the option for you. And then Nurse Hannah's coming in and she's going to tell you how this works, what's going to happen about this, when to be, concerned, and when to come back. And then you'll go see receptionist Sally and she will rebook you to come in and you'll come back. And so we're normalizing the physician staying in the physician lane, doing the expert level job. And then the giving away of the education piece feels super uncomfortable.
I can imagine
they do it better than you because they've got the time, they've got the language, you've taught them well.
Right.
So that they're
I can
able
imagine
to dive into that.
I can hear so many objections even in my own mind, because I can imagine that there would be someone on the receipt, like a patient. I can imagine a patient being like, what do you mean I'm not going to talk to the doctor about the education? I want to talk to the doctor only, right? So I can imagine the physician feeling, again, I know that these are our thoughts are going to create our feelings, but the physician really feeling the brunt of that. And I also think about this in terms of non-physician examples, how someone on the receiving end of saying, oh, the expert in my field is not the one that's taking care of all parts of my wellness or my care. It's going to be delegated to somebody else. How do you help someone navigate managing the thoughts and feelings of the recipient of this?
This is what happens anyway. You go to the accountant and Sally checks you in and you meet with Matt, who takes all of your documents off you. And then your accountant comes in and spends the next 45 minutes going through sorts of things. And then Wanda's the one who's actually going to put it together and email it to you. And then it's Sally who's actually checking that you replied to the email. Your accountant's got nothing to do with any of that. It's already being done in so many industries.
Right. So it's actually what you're saying. It's like just validating the fact that actually it is a really normal experience to have systems and teams in place, but there's probably lots of pockets of time that professional women are taking on responsibilities that they could be delegating, and actually giving yourself permission to play and experiment with training other people on your team to do something better than you could.
And then we come up with the objection of, I have no team. So you don't have a team member. You're going to do this solo. So start being noticing of, what am I doing that takes so long? A really good example of this is a script renewal. So a request comes in for a script renewal. Now you have a choice always. I say, yes, I want to renew them because I know this patient. I'll have them in anyway. I'll just get this done. But you look at the first medication and it's a thyroid medication, which you think you could just renew. But when did they last have blood work? And what is the indication for this? If this person's had thyroid cancer, I need to know that their thyroid function was done recently. But I also need to remember that about them. So in the prescription, the way I start to help future Sarah is when I write that prescription, I write a little thing in the free text that says, this patient's had thyroid cancer. The aim for the TSH, the thyroid level, is this. That then is a so much faster prescription renewal. Otherwise,
Mm.
every thyroid renewal, I'm like, did this
You
person
have
have
to
cancer?
dig through the
Did this
chart and
person
try
have
to
cancer?
figure
I
it
have to go
out.
digging. 8 minutes
Yes.
per script renewal. I don't have time for that.
Right. This is kind of mind-blowing. What you're talking about is actually training yourself to be your own best team member so that you are helping future you to
Future me.
be much more quick and efficient with your
Yep.
process. So even if you don't have, assistants and team and
Mhm.
colleagues that are to create a system in place, which is, I mean, I would love that for everybody. If you're a solo practitioner or a solopreneur or someone that's on your own, that you can become your own teammate. But this is requiring training yourself to be efficient in the moment.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
within business. So the example I will give is I was asked for this podcast to give my, social media handles and my picture, all that. Well, we have that all in one place, so I can just
Mhm.
plunk it towards
Yeah.
you rather
Right.
than, I gotta do that again. It takes me 8 to
Right.
10 minutes to find that every single time. By putting up those assets for your business, the assets for yourself, the things that you're asked to do over and over, how can you streamline that? So you do it once well, and then it just maybe needs a tweak or two each time we use it, but it is in place. So we're not recreating that every time.
Oh, I
Oh,
love
already
that. It's
did
like
this.
creating these like systems. It's almost like creating systems in place, which again, I think speaking to our earlier point, will take an investment of some time, energy, effort, and bandwidth. It's like the goat road with the rocks and just choosing the discomfort in the moment. But we're talking about creating systems that will set you up for future you. And future you is going to be so grateful that
Yeah.
you've done this work and taken this effort. Sarah, if you could, I mean, I feel being like talk about this for hours and hours because I could nerd out on efficiency and all these kinds of things forever. If you could leave everyone with one piece of like strategic, tangible advice, physician or not, really women in any professional industry, what can they do to leave their work at work and get home on time? One piece of strategic advice they can start taking into account today.
Yeah, I think that first know that it's possible to create a different experience. And what is it that you want? Just get really imaginative, take yourself on a walk, have a long shower, and just decide what am I craving? What do I desire? What would I love to go and create in the world? Just because it doesn't exist right now does not mean it can't. And even if it takes you 3 years to figure it out, won't it be so much more fun to be there than here? Okay, so just that it's possible. And then just start to notice what is happening within your day. Kind of be awakened to this big step back and say, what is it that creates this same thing over and over? And one of the very low hanging fruit, easy things to start with is, can we complete work as we go, even if it's just the easy ones for the day? Or when do you notice that you're saying, I'll have a look at that. Oh, I don't have time for that right now. And you close it again. That's doing work twice or 3 or 4 times. When do you have the time to do that? That protected time to open that up and get it done. That's when we should be looking at it. So how do we start to plan our day so that when we're going to go and look sticky beak at that task, we actually have the time to complete that task?
There's three things that I'm taking away from this. The first one, and I love the use of the word awakened, because a lot of what we're talking about is we've just been subconsciously going through the motions because that's what we've been taught and we haven't challenged it. So being awakened and just taking inventory from your most conscious self to become aware of where are the obstacles in your day, where are the inefficiencies, where are the interruptions, where are you pushing things off to later. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I heard you say is really becoming aware of where you're double or triple working. So you open up the work and then you close the work and then you open up the work and then you close the work. I think that is something that probably if you become awake to this piece, you're probably double or triple working. And then the third one, this is the most impactful, is how can I close this work right now? Is it possible for me to close this right now? Like just wrap up the chart right now, wrap up the email right now. And I think another favorite one is just like, it doesn't have to be A work. It can be A minus. It can be a B plus. We can just to get it done and wrap up the loop so we can move on in our day.
Yeah.
I love it, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your wisdom. I love having experts in their field come and share their perspective and their voice. And I know that people listening will find this episode so incredibly valuable. Tell us all how we can find you, learn more about you. Tell us everything.
Sure. So I also have a podcast, if you're into podcasts, called Sustainable Clinical Medicine, where we have others talking about how they've managed their clinical day or things like that. Chartingcoach.ca is where you'll find me in terms of a website, or on Instagram as Charting Coach, or in Facebook as Charting Coach. So yeah.
I love it. Tag us on Instagram if you found a nugget, tag us both and let us know what you're taking away from this episode. I just find that when we really anchor to what we're taking away, we're not just passively learning, which I know is fun, guys. I know listening to the podcast is fun, but we want to start actively implementing the things that Sarah talked about on this podcast. So tell us what you're going to start implementing today. And I hope you guys all have an amazing week. Sarah, thank you so, so much for coming onto the podcast. And I'll see you guys all next week. Bye. I am just blown away by this conversation. I love bringing guest experts onto the podcast to share their perspective and their unique angles in how their work is impacting the lives of professional women. So I hope you love today's expert, Dr. Sarah Smith, and everything she shared. Truly, I love it when she said bucket loads of time, because I just know that the number one complaint, I know this was my complaint, and what I see with my clients is the thought, I just don't have enough time. But I think what Sarah shared today was just starting with the possibility, getting curious. I wonder what if it could be different. And I think this applies so much with weight loss too. I know for so many years, I used to think weight loss just must be hard because I haven't lost the weight yet, or it must take a lot of willpower and a lot of struggle and a lot of buckling down. And I just didn't want to lose weight that way. I want you to plant the seed of possibility. What if it was possible that weight loss could in fact be simple, maybe even fun? And also, if you folded in certain skills and tools, that you could have your dream ideal weight for a lifetime. If that is something that you are interested in, grab your consult call with me and let's decide if we are a best fit to work together. Head over to theunstoppablemombrain.com/group. You will get all of the details about how we work together and we'll decide if we're a best fit. The group is 6 months and the next cohort is starting in April 2024. If you're listening to this in real time, we have live weekly coaching calls every Wednesday. There is daily written coaching, personal mentorship, where you will get your unique questions answered. We will overcome your specific obstacles. I will often throw on my camera and do personal trainings with the obstacle that they're overcoming. And the beauty of this is everyone gets to benefit from it. There's the best, most amazing brand new on-demand video curriculum that will teach you the process, super fun workbook that you get the moment that you join. And honestly, I think more than anything, and something that I think is often understated, an intimate community of like-minded women that also have the same goal. When you surround yourself with women that are similar to you, but maybe in different professions, they have different obstacles coming up, your brain will become more valuable. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard my clients tell me, I would never have thought to bring that one obstacle to this coaching call, or I haven't faced that obstacle yet, but I can totally see how that could be in my future. When you are in an intimate small group, your brain becomes as valuable as all of the brains in the room, which is why, in my opinion, intimate small group coaching is the best way for you to lose the weight you want. Not only do you learn science-backed strategies, but you get to learn from the wins and the mistakes of how everyone is losing the weight in the most permanent and lasting way. So don't wait another minute. This group is truly amazing. It will feel like home and a landing spot for you where nothing is too big, nothing is too small. I have coached on it all, and it is a physician-approved roadmap for you to lose the weight you want this year. Don't wait another minute. I want to see your name pop up in my email inbox. Grab your consult spot over at theunstoppablemombrain.com/group. And I cannot wait to see you in the group. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I will see you next week. Bye.